being made in a pandemic season. And of course, it's the what they call the penultimate, no? So,
Mm,
Penultimate, yes,
oh,
the
mm.
so
penultimate, and
yeah,
And
penultimate sauna,
certainly,
and
no, and certainly the setup was relevant, di ba? I think it affected the president himself. Kita mo naman, parang he stuck to the script with no live
nagpitigil.
audience there. Uh,
and
tapos,
when it ended, it was so unceremonious, right?
mm,
I mean, they
mm,
didn't even know that it had ended. Like
mm,
he just said, "Thank you," and then he just said,
I'm
"I'm
through.
through."
Mm. Uh, Tapos kanina, I mean, COVID was in the air even prior to this, of course, di ba? May nag-test na positive among the people that were expected. So for a time, there was that question kung itutuloy pa nila sa batasan or they're gonna go to Plan B, which was Malacanang. Obviously, they decided to stick with Plan A, as they said, na doon. But at the end of the day, I think we were talking to analysts and observers, and despite COVID being the biggest thing in our story right now, the reality is people nabitin yung mga tao. They didn't really hear that much about COVID or the plans moving forward on at least details on how to attack it.
Yeah, he was
Mhm, mhm.
he was on fighting mode again against
Mm,
oligarchs. No,
mm,
it was the beginning of his speech, and it
mm,
was the ending of his speech. No, he
mm.
started by hitting out the oligarchs, and Senator
Well,
Frank
he started with Trilon and
Tamang-tama.
came full circle again to the oligarchs at the end of the speech. So,
mm,
wow,
Mm,
talagang it was, you could tell it was very heavily on him for whatever reason. No, but
mm.
mm. And tamang-tama ang first guest natin for tonight is the senator that the president tagged as the protector of the oligarchs. We have with us Senate Minority Leader Franklin Dillon. Sir, good evening po, and thank you for joining us tonight.
sir,
Good evening, Ed.
here
Good evening,
the
good
top
people.
of
Hi,
all.
Rob. Good evening, Robbie.
Sir, first 5 minutes of the president's sauna, you took center stage. The president said you took advantage of the preoccupation of the government with the COVID-19 pandemic, and he said that you're bringing up the among other things the issue of political dynasties shows that you are a protector of the oligarchs. Were you even there, sir, during the sauna? Were you online or were you in person
No, no, I
there?
was listening, and I nearly fell off my chair. Firstly, let me make it clear to your program. It was in this program, I think, about 2 weeks ago, when you asked me what do I expect from the president's speech. I said I would
Mm-hmm.
like to see the how do we move forward with what the problems that we have. I'm waiting for the president to present to us a comprehensive plan
Mm-hmm.
uh, of how to get out of this mess. And I distinctly remember it was in your program when I said this. Now, so I was surprised that he opened his speech with a personal attack on me. I am not the enemy po. I am it is pandemic which is the enemy. Now, but having said that, let me make it of record.
Hmm.
I do not owe anything to the Lopezes. Wala po akong utang na loob sa kanila. If I defended ABS-CBN and disagreed with the termination or the non-renewal of their franchise, it was because of the principle of freedom of the press. I thought that it would send a chilling effect on media owners if what happened to the ABS-CBN would be would be repeated in the future. So I said, no, the non-renewal is wrong, especially during the time of the pandemic today, where ABS-CBN was a source of information in addition to, of course, your outfit, but indeed, we needed every media outlet to send information to our people, and ABS-CBN performed that role. And thirdly, I was concerned about the 11,000 employees of ABS-CBN, uh, where the franchise was not renewed. You know what will happen to these 11,000 employees? Right now, they're looking for a job, and unfortunately,
Mm.
jobs are not so easy to look for because of the pandemic. So if
Senator Brillan, I mean, just to get this out of the way, no? Kasi bukod dun sa Lopez, may isa pa siyang very pointed question sa inyo. He would like to know daw, were you with ACRA and did you have a hand in terminating the contract for Manila Water?
I pledged by the graves of my parents, I have not even seen the shadow of that agreement, Robbie. I had nothing to do with it. And I am willing to undergo through a lie detector test. I have not done, I have not seen up to this point. I have not seen that water concession agreement. I was already retired from Accra. By the time it was during the presidency of President Ramos, and I was not. I had nothing to do with that. I had, as I repeat, I have not even seen the shadow of that agreement. So I think the president, is misinformed about this, and unfortunately, notwithstanding my repeated denial, he keeps on attributing these contracts to me, and I would repeat it. I have not seen this contract. I had no participation whatsoever, not even a camera period in this concession agreement.
To be sure, Senator, hindi naman kayo nag-iisa doon sa mga kumontra sa rejection ng ABS-CBN franchise. No? And we're really looking for a context, a reason for why he would bring you up in something as important as the State of the Nation address. Can you think of any other reason aside from the fact that you are, an opposition leader?
You know, when that thing about the oligarchy came up, I said, look, it should not be based on personalities, because there's an oligarch today. In the next administration, there will be an oligarch. So I said, what we should do is to reform the system, strengthen our laws, like the Anti-Competition Act, if it can be improved, and let us improve our system and our laws so that we can prevent the oligarchs from coming in. And part of that, I said, is a passage of an anti-dynasty law. And that probably he thought that I meant his family. That is not true. As early as the 10th Congress in 1995, I already voted for the anti-dynasty proposal in the Senate. And in this 18th Congress, at the start of this 18th Congress, in first week of July 2016, 4 years ago, I already filed a bill which I considered a priority bill in order to implement the constitutional prohibition on dynasty. So it had nothing to do with his family. And when I was asked, I said, I am sure that the president can rise above all of this and support the anti-dynasty law. That was my statement.
Senator, did you mention them? Did he just feel alluded to, or did you in fact mention them? Because he said his
Yes.
quote is that he arrogantly mentioned, among others, oligarchs need not be rich. Then he linked the anti-dynasty system with the oligarchy, and he said, and the topic was my daughter and son.
And he also said that you said that it did not take a rich family to be a dynasty or an oligarch, and that you made his family an example.
No,
Something
of course
to that
not.
effect.
That's
Yeah.
totally untrue. And I would ask him to produce, if I made that statement on the press, produce it. I will admit if I made that statement, but I did not make that statement. And I know what else did you say, Robbie?
He said the direct quote he said is you liken the anti-dynasty system with the oligarchy, and he said, quote, the topic was my daughter and my son.
No, the topic, and I never mentioned his children in that context. In fact, when I was asked by media, what about the president, the family of the president, I said, the president can rise above all of these things and support an anti-dynasty bill in law in implementation of the provision of the 1987 Constitution, requiring Congress or calling upon Congress to pass an anti-dynasty measure. So I never mentioned his family. In fact, I said I am sure that the president can rise above all of this and support an anti-dynasty bill.
Sir, another topic, sir. The president also ordered several government agencies, DOJ, DepEd, and DICT, to tap the other the TV frequencies that have been reverted to the government. I presume that he's talking about ABS-CBN for the distance learning modules that they need to do this coming school year. What's the implication of this?
What's what? I'm sorry.
What's the implication of this? If they're looking at using ABS-CBN's former frequencies for distance learning, and government is looking at DepEd is looking at tapping the frequency, what's the implication of this?
Well,
SCBN has agreed. They just released a news statement saying that they're very willing to have their frequency or transmission facilities used for this.
Facilities. Now they're talking about facilities.
Yes.
well, the frequency is owned by the state.
That's right.
So it is within the power of the government not to allow a certain frequency, the use of a frequency. I repeat, the frequency is part of of government assets, being government, and therefore, if they will no longer concede or give to ABS-CBN the frequency because ABS-CBN no longer has a franchise, that's a legal position that they can take. Because the basis of a frequency is the existence of a franchise.
Now, Senator, very quickly, beyond the question of the franchise on ABS-CBN, as the president. Yeah, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Now, beyond ABS-CBN, its franchise, the president also had a message for the two telcos, and he said either shape up or else by December. And beyond that, he mentioned expropriation as among the things you will not like if you don't shape up. Any reaction?
Well, again, if you just talk about the authority of government, again, the grant of a license is within the sovereign powers of the government, and whether or not he will do it is a matter that we will see down the road by December. But if you're just talking about the authority of the president, it's difficult to dispute that.
Yes, sir. Sir, but on a legal matter, sir, when somebody talks about expropriation, is that just involving land, or could that also possibly include the facilities? Because the president mentioned the expropriation.
The expropriation is not limited to to land, and expropriation can be any property which maybe the government may take over in the interest of the public.
So that could include buildings, equipment, and property, not just the real property as in land.
Not just their property. There is no such limitation, to my knowledge, that the power to expropriate is limited to the land.
So what do you think about that threat? That he was saying, if you don't improve your services, he may even go that way. I mean, to the extent of expropriating their facilities.
Well, I will leave that to our own conclusion at this point. I would rather wait what happens in December, the deadline he gave to the telcos.
All right.
Okay. Senate Minority Leader Franklin Dillon, sir, maraming salamat po for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Salamat po.
Okay, we will just go into a break, so please stay with us. Sino intro?
Sir Robby po.
Roger.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. Now joining us is our Dr. Jean Encinas Franco of the University of the Philippines and Professor Edmund Tayao of the Ateneo School of Government. Professor Tayao and Professor Franco, welcome to the Chiefs.
Welcome.
Hi, good
Good
evening.
evening.
Evening, Dr. Encinas.
Hi, Dr. Franco, let me start with you. Your reactions to the SONA. I mean, obviously, COVID is the biggest theme for the country right now. People were looking forward to hearing governance plans. Did you hear it? And beyond COVID, did you hear
Thank
what you
you
wanted to hear or
once
what you were
again,
expecting to hear?
Rob, and the whole team.
Hi. Ah, hi.
Hello, Jean.
Hi.
Hi, Dr.
Oh,
G.
hi.
Ang
Oh, yeah.
naman pala ang delay ni Professor Tai.
Mm,
Yeah, oo. May delay
Sobrang
siya.
delay siya.
mm.
Yeah. Shall I answer Robin, na?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead, go ahead.
There were measures mentioned by the president, but to me, it was not a plan. My sense is that a plan is something that's bigger. A plan should have a vision of how to move this country forward with COVID. No, so and when you have a plan, you have to have a vision, and you have to have some sort of a blueprint on how each agency the LGU units would resolve or respond to the displacement of people, the unemployment problem, the OFWs, businesses that have actually been displaced. So these are the health system, for instance. So these are things that I was looking for, not just a bunch of measures, because I got the sense during the speech that these were just submitted by each agency, but as to
Mm.
how they are going to coordinate with each other, I did not see that.
Yes, and these are measures already pending in Congress. Like
Yes, yes.
yung CREATE, yung CARE, tsaka yung Bayanihan to
Mhm.
recover as one bills.
Yes, yes.
So, So were you disappointed? Were you,
Bitin.
expect anything that, I guess, something new from the president, knowing as how he would always conduct his speeches?
Yeah, oo. I guess the one thing that's new is that he attempted to have empathy when he said that I know what you are undergoing, but yeah, well, I think he was coached to do that, and also the fact that he stuck to
Script.
he started on time, and as much as possible he refrained from ad libs, pero hindi pa rin napigilan at
Mm,
some point. So yeah, these are the things that. But then again, when he started with Senator Drilon, I was really turned off and ended with Senator Drilon because I guess it's something that should not be done
mm,
because you're speaking before the nation, and it's unfair to the
Mm.
senator. The political space is not proper.
mm,
Okay.
Mm.
Hey, Professor Tayo, I'm just curious. Obviously, this was, as we said, the penultimate SONA of the president. He has one more next year. This is a SONA also that leads us to election season next year.
Mhm.
If this were not in the time of COVID and you had the full Congress there, I imagine the tenor would have been very different. Did the president lose any opportunity here because of COVID? Never mind his actual message and what happened now, but how much did COVID change the entire occasion?
You know, let me approach it this way. No, because of the pandemic, all the more did it put into full view, no, the limitations of government, no, the institutional weakness of the government. And of course, we've seen this all throughout, no, even before the pandemic, the coordination between the national, local governments, between the different agencies. um, there's so much to be had, so to speak. Yeah, to a certain extent, of course, we may probably be expecting more from the president as far as what the assessment of how the government has been addressing or what's this facing the challenges of the pandemic. But most of the legislative proposals mentioned by the president actually are related to dealing with the pandemic. Um, Alam mo, regardless where you sit, of course, you will have what's this biases, no, and political preferences. And so I have to say, of course, that to those who are expecting a president who's really going to stick to the script and avoid any canto speak or what have you, lalo na yung joke niya na kung hindi nyo naintindihan yung sinasabi ko, ako din hindi ko naintindihan. uh, he's been president for 4 years. Whether we like it or not, there are some promises that were delivered. Even if he continues to say, "I don't understand this," my people understand this better, and so on. Um, Kumbaga yung style niya talagang nandyan na, wala na tayong magawa dyan, no? Patapos naman na yung term nung mama. I'm not sure whether that still has value, no, as far as having to criticize what the president said. So, having said that, COVID or no COVID, ASONA to me has to really zero in on the structural limitations of government. And in this regard, sa totoo lang, medyo kulang pa. But perhaps the president is already aware that he can only do so much in the remaining 2 years. But apart from that, he's also saying, wait, there's only 2 years left, but it's not that I think I can't do much. I will still be doing so much that needs to be done. Siguro kung meron akong i-criticize doon sa SONA ng presidente, yung walang katapusang death penalty. Kasi marami naman ng pag-aaral dyan, ano? And to say that it's going to be deterrent, we've seen so many arguments against that as well. And again, going back to the structural reforms, which to a certain extent was attempted in some regard by the president, some of the approaches may not be something that we agree with, no. Pero yung sa death penalty, sana ang tututukan talaga dito yung buong what's this legal system natin, from the investigation to prosecution to justice, no? Kasi again, I always insist, pansinin niyo lahat ng criminal cases palaging dependent sa eyewitness.
Witnesses.
Pag nawala
Yes.
yung mawawala na yung kaso, no? How many forensic labs do we have, and how much forensic capacity do our police have, no, at this juncture? Yun lang, dami municipalities having only three uniformed policemen, and ilan ng residente ng isang munisipyo, no? Tapos how does the investigative part, prosecution part? I'm sure some of you may have already encountered some instances the fiscal even have to invent some case or something as simply because there's not enough evidence. To make the long story short, before we get to the death penalty part, ayusin muna natin yung buong proseso. Yun yung kulang dun eh, no? So I won't be commenting anymore on his style, and I have to say again, I have my own political biases, but if we stick to the policy pronouncements of the president, there is so much to learn about. There's so much to criticize, and there's so much to enrich and support at the same time.
Mhm.
Did you
Pero,
find it
sir-
remarkable that Dr. Franco, did you find it remarkable that he did not in any way mention the anti-terror law? There was not even any mention of, peace negotiations with the left, nothing at all on that. And yet, there was a lot of mention of giving larger pensions to the military and to the police. There was mention of martial law and how he did not abuse that, or the government did not. But there was no mention of the anti-terror law. Do you find that
Yeah.
remarkable? And
Yeah,
what
I think that was
was?
that was a bit weird considering that it has been all over the media in the past month. But maybe he did not want to touch on it given the criticisms that have been hurled against the passage of that law.
Mhm.
So,
Well, along those lines po, the president did mention the issue of human rights. Pero it seemed to me, I don't know if you agree with this, it seemed to me that medyo nagbago ng konti yung timpla niya when it comes to the phrase human rights. Kanina kasi when he was talking about human rights, he was saying that we will not dodge obligations to human rights on the fight for human rights. As well, sinabi niya na, the right to live, the right against to be protected from crime is also a human right. That seems to be quite distant from his previous pronouncements na parang kalaban talaga yung konsepto ng human rights.
Yeah. But then he also said that a death penalty must be enacted into by Congress. So marami ring contradictions, no? The president also said that he's very much supportive of OFWs and their welfare, and yet he also mentioned that natural lang naman yung nare-rape na domestic workers sa Middle East. So these are contradictions in themselves dun sa speech ni Presidente.
okay.
Professor Tayo?
Yeah.
What do you make of? I mean, I'd like your take on Luci's question. Yung hindi pagkakabanggit sa anti-terror law. Can you read or should we be reading into that, into his not having touched that in terms of might this suggest, as they say, pagkasasona, and when the president speaks, you don't want to show any weakness at all. Might people read into this something that they might know about how the cases against anti-terror law in the Supreme Court might?
Akala ko si Jean yung tinatanong. Sorry. Well, if you read the law, no, and again, I've of course, I'm able to refer to lawyers who know more about how the law should be written and so on. First, let me point out that the anti-terror law, compared to other laws on other crimes, other kinds of crimes, prospective kasi. So, yun yung problema niyan. Pangalawa, and this is something that I'm uh, quite interesting to me when you look at the social media. Ang laging hina-highlight doon yung dagdag doon sa number of days that one will be
Arrested without warrant.
pero hindi na-highlight doon yung provision na nakalagay na immediately dapat in the presence of a lawyer yung isang akusado. At saka yung importanteng elemento doon that in fact before a suspect can be taken in, no? And ang possible source of evidence mo lang diyan yung ginamit sa pagtap ng telepono mo and so on, no? Bago ka makatap ng telepono, ang pupuntahan mo hindi RTC pero yung Court of Appeals, no? So again, in theory, no, you can rely more or there's more reliability, no, in the Court of Appeals compared to RTC. Now, if yung batas lang yung magiging basis natin, sa akin again, I'm not a lawyer but I went through the law itself. I find nothing that is problematic there. One thing that I will agree, kailangan mong i-specify, may mga vague provisions talaga doon that sadly is open to interpretation, not so much because of the law again, but with what I was trying to point out earlier. Kaya ayaw mo ng open to interpretation yung batas natin kasi yung public institutions natin sobrang kulang, sobrang mahina, sobrang incapacitated to describe it, no, for lack of a better term. So in other words, yun kasi yung problema sa policy making natin, masyado tayong piecemeal, no? Tingi-tingi. We don't look at it in a more comprehensive way. And so the tendency is to be divided politically, that one is pro this political group and the other against this political group. So doon ngayon nagpupunta yung usapan, hindi doon sa policy mismo.
Yes, but Professor, ulitin ko lang, not to get into a discussion about the anti-terror law, ulitin ko lang, given everything that you've said and given how strongly this government has pushed for it, why didn't the president even mention it?
To be honest, Rob, I wouldn't even hasten a guess why. No, could be perhaps the speechwriter failed to put it there, or that in the end, when they were finalizing the speech, they thought that it's not as important as the other issues that were included in the speech. Third, you could say that perhaps some of the decision makers involved in the preparation of the SONA and what the president is going to say thought that this is already in the Supreme Court, so we might want to leave the Supreme Court to decide on the case. I don't know really, but politically, I don't think that it's a political reason why the president would leave it out.
But Professor Tayao, are you satisfied with the fact that he did not really lay out a holistic, let's call it, plan to address this pandemic, not just in the short term, but also in the long? Because considering, of course, that there have been so many criticisms on how the government has been handling the crisis.
Well, admittedly, there's so much to be had in that regard. There was an attempt to put together. Alam mo kasi, at the end of the day, the president was, to my mind, attempting to explain that it's not just about health. It's not just about security. In fact, it's both health and security, mainly because it is also economic. So, in other words, this goes back to the debate not only within the president's official family, but even among friends. For example, some of my friends would insist, dapat kasi hindi na pinayagan yung mga tao na lumabas, dapat nasa loob sila, lalabas lang sila pag bibili ng gamot, ng pagkain. Fine. But can you imagine, again, I was trying to explain in one of your other programs earlier, you go to the mall and you will find it surprising, and siguro matutuwa ka if you're into shopping and want to buy shoes. Yung mga sapatos natin na 8,000 mabibili mo lang ng 2,000 ngayon. For a consumer, that's good. That's good news. It's like a fire sale, so to speak. Pero hindi mo ba maiisip na yung negosyante is at the losing end, and perhaps he's just really doing away as fast as possible the merchandise that remains, no, in the store, and in the end magsasara yan, at ang dami na ngang nagsara. So what I'm saying here is, ang hirap magdesisyon na health lang ang tutukan natin, and yung economy hayaan na muna natin. Some would say the government should continue giving what's this amelioration program and so on, and fine. Some would say government afford it because of so many additional taxes and so fine. But imagine the contradiction between the basic goods like food that skyrocketed almost immediately when the lockdown happened, no? And itong mga other goods na biglang bumagsak yung presyo. You're already talking of a mix of inflation or contraction or whatsoever. Perhaps we can ask an economist in this regard. So the whole thing is
Okay. Okay, it seems we've lost
Pero professors, including Professor Jean, isn't that what you would expect from the SONA? A sense of direction, a sense of vision, a sense of balance. Considering that you have these two that you have to weigh, ano mas matimbang dapat? Isn't that what you would want to expect from City the Nation?
Yeah, exactly. But then, yeah, and that's where leadership comes in. No? I mean, you can only plan if there's leadership. Otherwise, it's going to be there are measures mentioned, but it's going to be a hodgepodge of measures. And true enough, tama yung sinabi niya, no, ni Lucci, na kailangan meron ding measures even after his term ends. I mean, it doesn't have to be the Duterte administration who should administer it, but then he should plan in the long term, because
How,
this is going to affect the next administration, definitely.
so how would you grade the SONA if you were to grade it
5?
out of
Out
10?
of
Out of?
I mean, I thought UP grade.
Ah,
Oh, but
Cinco.
that's also
Sorry,
that's bad.
that's a 5.0. So,
UP grade 5 is failure.
sorry.
Hindi man lang 4.
cinco.
Sorry.
Ateneo scale, Ateneo scale.
At
One being the highest. Professor Tayo.
well, I'll give the president a passing mark.
Okay,
Okay.
sa UP.
Okay, sige. We'll leave it at that. We need to take a break. Maraming salamat po, Sir Jean Franco of the University of the Philippines and Professor Edmund Tayo of the Ateneo School of Government. Please stay right there. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. We are now in the final stage of our conversation on the President's fifth State of the Nation address, or SONA. And joining us is, well, the name's a bit difficult and unusual, Clyra Orbayan, the acting special reports editor of the Varsitarian, the student organ of UST, the University of Santo Tomas. Now, the Varsitarian conducted I think this is fact checking, right? Fact checking coverage of the SONA in partnership with the UST Journalism Society and The Flame, the student publication of the UST Faculty of Arts and Letters. Good evening, Clyra. Is that right,
Kyra.
Clyra?
Yes
Clyra.
po,
Okay.
Kyra.
Okay. Well, let's start it off with what were the contentious issues that you found in your fact checking?
First off po, it's the issue about the face-to-face classes. Um, Students, especially students in UST, are finding it a little vague. Yung face-to-face classes po natin is very hindi po siya mas nalinaw ng CHED and ng DepEd. Sinabi po ni President Duterte kanina na hindi niya papayagan na magkaroon ng face-to-face classes kapag walang vaccine. However, inapprove niya po ang face-to-face classes sa mga remote, sa
COVID-free
low-risk areas.
Yes.
So, yun po yung hinuhope namin ng sector ng youth na sana may plan ang government, clear-cut plan for us students in this pandemic. Kasi yun po yung hinuhope namin na makita sa SONA. It's the plan, it's the hope para may makita po namin na the government is doing something for the sake of its students. And well, dun po sa SONA kanina, it's clear na napaka-vague pa rin nung plano ng government for its students. Yun,
Okay.
yeah.
Pero Clyra, kasi I think it's also a fact-checking initiative on your part. Did you find any inaccuracies dun sa ulat ng Pangulo?
The context po sa West Philippine Sea, yung sinabi niya po na we are not ready for war, but we found out na hindi niya po ini-impose yung Hague ruling. So that means we need more context. And doon din po sa face-to-face classes, which is it needs more context po sa part ni President kasi he approved face-to-face classes on low-risk areas. And may mga truth din naman po na sinabi dun sa build. Yun po.
Actually, may bago plant.
Oh.
Yes po, yung plan. It's very interesting po na malaman po yung mga bagong i-impose ng government natin.
Alam mo, Clyra, I'm more...
Okay, Clyra, anong masasabi mo sa yung mga sinuggest niya na halimbawa gamitin ang frequencies para, meaning broadcast frequencies, no? Para sa education. Hindi ka ba natutuwa doon bilang isang estudyante?
First off po, meron pong PTV, may IBC frequencies, na fact check po namin yon. So, ano yung sa ABS-CBN, yung issue po ng ABS-CBN, dapat po siguro nabigyan pa ng context regarding that kasi if the government is really yung goal nila is to bring educational programs to its population, I mean, kailangan nilang i-utilize yung frequencies na nila, which is meron na silang PTV frequencies and IBC.
Oh, Clyra, I'm more interested in what you're doing as a very young student journalist, and especially getting into this. I think it's wonderful that our young journalists are getting into fact checking, not not just as an activity but as a movement. Kailangan talaga natin ito. But I'm curious
Initiative.
from your experience, gaano kahirap i-fact check ng presidente, especially in a speech like this? Mabilis, parang he's tackling 20, 30, 40, 50 issues within 1.5 hours. How hard is it to fact check the president po in a solo speech? And how do you do it? How exactly do you do it?
It's really very hard po kasi we're not in a newsroom. Unlike po sa UST na meron po kaming office, we do it through Facebook Messenger and a system in Google Sheets. Pero we really believed in the initiative because I told the staff na we are part of a very pivotal part of history. This is a very crucial part of history, and let's be honored that that we are part of this because we're already a part of history. Eh. So to cover this asona amid a pandemic and in a crumbling state of democracy, I mean, it's an honor to be a journalist right now. It's relevant more than ever.
Ilan kayong involved dyan sa initiative na yan?
We are composed of the Journalism Society and the Flame. Nasa more or less 30 lang po kami.
Okay. Now ako, gusto kong balikan yung sinabi mo, no? You want to be a journalist in this time, pero you see how the president talks about media. You know how he talks about journalists. Nakita mo naman, nagsara ang ABS-CBN, daming problema, inaatake ang Rappler. Journalists are all complaining that there's not enough commitment to press freedom. Why do you want to become a journalist?
That motivates us more po. Hearing those things really makes us inspired as student journalists kasi nakikita namin kung ano yung problema kung ano na yung nangyayari sa democracy natin, and we're an essential part of that, and it's our responsibility. Nakikita namin po ito as a responsibility as a campus journalist and motivate kami to do our job because we are the future of the media. And if we don't act now, if we don't act or put things in history, put the truth in history, then magko-crumble lang lalo ang democracy natin.
Parang it's the best of times and the worst of times. Apologies to Charles Dickens.
Pero Boka, yan ang state of the nation. Yan ang state of the nation. I mean, really inspiring to see young people speaking like this.
Thank you po.
Bago isip mo. Okay. Okay, maraming salamat. Clara Orbian, right? Orbian, sorry. I'm thinking kasi O'Brien eh. Orbian. Maraming salamat kay Clara Orbian, Special Reports Editor ng The Varsitara ng UST. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
And that will be all for this special naman talaga, di ba? Edition of the Chiefs. We hope what is discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Edling of One News.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News.